I'd like to welcome you to the Elliott V Awards. My name is Mary Ellen. I'm on the board. I'd like to thank you for coming out on this somewhat cold and rainy evening. Normally we would do a plaque for our past president, but she is caught on deadline, which is a feeling we can all relate to. So anyway, with that, I'll hand it off to Cesare.
And thank you everyone for coming tonight. My name is Cesare Potko. I cover finance for ProPublica. And on behalf of the New York Financial Writers Association Board of Governors, I welcome you to tonight's event. May is always my favorite time at the association because we always have two events that bookend each other quite well. Just last week, we gave out $30,000 of scholarships to young financial journalists who are just starting their careers in this industry. And tonight, we gather to honor the career of someone who has already contributed a lot to our profession. That's the spirit in which the Financial Writers Association bestows its highest honor, the Elliott V Award. Named after our association's founding president and longtime New York Times reporter, the award has become a sort of lifetime achievement award. But it's also a good reminder for young journalists like our scholarship recipients of what they should aspire to if they choose to stay in this field. So with that alone having been said, I think many of you in this room can see why Dan Hertzberg was such an obvious choice for this year's award. But for those of you who are not familiar with Dan's career, let me just spend a few brief minutes to tell you why our award committee, which I chaired, was delighted to choose Dan as this year's recipient. Dan joined the Wall Street Journal in 1977 as a reporter, covering a succession of beats that included banking, M&A, and insider trading. In 1988, he became the initial editor of the journal's new money and investing section and helped turn it into a must-read for everyone on Wall Street. From M&I editor, he moved on to national editor, deputy managing editor, and in 2005, senior deputy managing editor, the #2 editorial job under then managing editor Paul Steiger, who is in this room sitting behind him. When he announced his retirement from the Journal in 2009, Dan was promptly snapped up by Bloomberg News, where he continued on as global leader of their financial coverage in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, until he finally did retire, this time for real, in 2014. When Dan's nomination came to our committee, it is, of course, with this impressive bio that we looked at it, but it was something else instead that caught our eye. What really was impressive, though, was his attention and interest in all levels of reporters. He'd spent time discussing stories with junior reporters and was a mentor to many, said one former Bloomberg colleague who nominated Dan. And indeed, if you reach out to Dan's former colleagues, as I have, one constant refrain that I heard was that he is someone who appreciates reporters, helps them improve their craft, and write the very best journalism that they are capable of doing. In that sense, Dan has built a much more impressive resume, one of talent that he has nurtured over the years. Names such as Mark Merrimont, Matt Winkler, Marcus Broccoli, Mike Siconolfi, Nik Deogun, Julia Angwin, Lisa Abramowicz, and Liam Vaughn, just to name a few. No matter how narrow or niche your beat might seem, Dan would make you think that it is important and walk over to your desk and ask you, what is the single most important thing that you can say about corn futures if you happen to cover corn futures? That was a real example I was given. As Julia Angwin recalled, you always had to have a leader idea ready in case Dan came by with heavy footsteps that sometimes got confused for her own. And a leader, for anyone who's not familiar, is a journal story, a front page enterprise story. Nor was it enough to just break a big story and be done with it. While Dan could always be counted on to send a congratulatory note after any big story, the notes always had a strong subtext. That is, they pressed for more. What else is there? Can you get more? Dan always wanted more reporting, more follow-ups, more big scoops, recalls Mark Merrimont. And when the stories did go to edit, even if Dan had to start over from the top a few times because phone calls kept interrupting him and the cursor would go back up to the first paragraph, the result was always hugely improved copy. He was a master at transforming prosecutorial screeds into stories that were fair and balanced. Mike Siconolfi noted when I asked him for a few thoughts about Dan. So it's not surprising that when Dan announced his retirement from the Journal in 2009, he promptly heard from one of the young reporters he edited back in the 1980s. Matt Winkler, who covered credit markets and the securities industry, under Dan and later on became the editor-in-chief at Bloomberg and an Elliott Award winner himself. These days, it's not uncommon, mind you, to hand in your resignation and move on from one job to the next in just simply a matter of days. But when Matt told Dan in November 1989 that he was resigning to go to Bloomberg, he stayed on for 3 more months just so he could finish more than a dozen additional stories for Dan. Matt said he even skipped his own going away party so that he could finish up a story for Dan, an example of the dedication that Dan would inspire in the reporters that he worked with. Asked for a word to describe Dan, Matt called him indispensable. Others call him inspiring, an editor with the enthusiasm of a young reporter, the ultimate news hound in a business full of them, or, as Paul Steiger put it, the Vince Lombardi of journalism. Dan, I regret to inform you that we cannot give you the Vince Lombardi trophy today. It's unfortunately a different line of work. But we are, however, plenty grateful and honored to give you this plaque and invite you to become the 40th annual Elliott Bell Award recipient.
I'm especially honored to be honored by my fellow financial writers. Sometimes in the past, we've all encountered condescension from other journalists who say business reporting is somehow out of the news mainstream, erudite, or, well, boring. The year 2008 put that idea to rest. It demonstrated that finance, in fact, is at the center of the world and, with a little help from Wall Street, can blow it up. Finance and business, in fact, cover much more of what the world really is than other branches of journalism. Even the failure of most of the financial press to predict the magnitude of the 2008 mortgage bond crisis pales in comparison with the performance or non-performance of the nation's political writers this year. I don't think we have to say any more. This year presents a serious challenge to financial reporters and editors amid a continuing revenue slump and staff cutbacks at newspapers, magazines, and TV. Your job couldn't be more important right now. There are huge financial uncertainties around the world. There is lackluster economic growth around the world despite unprecedented central bank actions. We are in a historic era of low and even negative interest rates. Did you even know what negative interest rates were a few years ago? Negative interest rates that are hurting investors and pension funds and creating mountains of debt around the world. There's a growing political backlash in the US and elsewhere against free trade and immigration. Finally, there's a dangerous slowdown in the Chinese economy and a huge buildup of debt among so-called zombie state-owned companies in China, backed by state-owned banks. We have a panel tonight of leading financial journalists that will try to answer the very timely question, will we be able to spot the next financial crisis? I've had a wonderful and exciting time in my 46 years as a journalist. I was privileged to tell the world some of what was really going on, which is our job. I had some exciting moments like the time a source, who will remain nameless, told me through an elliptical metaphor about cars that 2 of Wall Street's most powerful men were parking stock with each other. You know what happened there? I got to travel around the world, meet financial and political leaders, learn from the markets, and help to develop a new generation of reporters and editors, and sometimes tell the world things no one wanted us to know. I've worked with and learned from amazingly talented reporters and editors, people like Paul Steiger, journalism's finest editor and manager, and Matt Winkler, who was here earlier, who built Bloomberg News from a staff of 3 into a great news organization in 20 years, and who always had my back. Great reporters, some here tonight, like Jim Stewart, Mike Siconolfi, Nik Deogun, and a new generation like Lisa Abramowicz. My greatest partners in my career have been my wife, Barbara Kantrowitz, a consummate journalist, and my sons, Mike and Ben, of whom we are so proud. My concern and the concern of all of you is how we will continue to pay for the great financial reporting of the future, particularly investigative work. The best financial reporting is much more than reporting someone's words or reporting on a stock price. It requires digging through financial filings, making spreadsheets, and developing deep-throat sources, and it's not cheap. I've been fascinated recently to see reporting on the Panama Papers, a goldmine of secretive offshore companies. This has been an innovative international group effort coordinated by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, including the McClatchy newspapers in the US and major papers in Germany, the United Kingdom, and elsewhere. This could offer one new model among many. But we need the solitary reporter or small group of reporters who can go after the financial filing that doesn't look right, the financial product for small investors that doesn't pass the smell test, who get a tip from a source in a big corporation or on Wall Street, or spot trading in a stock bond or derivative that suggests collusion. Happily, there are a million great financial and business stories out there to be reported and written right now. So I assume you'll all go out right after this. So I'm jealous. I know you'll write them and have fun doing it. Thank you.